Anyway, Senator Graham, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Thank you. That was a good summary. It's funny you mentioned about the atrocities. I got some images last night sent to me from President Zelensky's folks. 3 young kids got killed last night. And, it's a brutal war. Hats off to President Trump. I see a light at the end of the tunnel. I hope it's not a train, but I really do believe we're on track here to maybe end this thing only because Putin is rattled by Trump. The way this war started is when Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, Putin seized the moment, saw weakness. How does this war end? When Putin believes that Trump will crush his economy, Putin's economy, if he doesn't end this war.
Okay, but hasn't Donald Trump already, showed him that he's going to? He said the consequences would be severe. I think upping NATO countries' contributions from 2% to 5%, that is significant. I think the EU trade deal to buy energy from us, not Russia, and fund his war machine, I think that's critical. The tariffs on India and selling sophisticated weaponry to Ukraine, that's been a pretty loud message from Donald J. Trump.
A huge message, and it worked. Putin didn't go to Alaska to kind of look at the scenery and check on Alaska how well you're doing after we sold it to you. He went to Alaska because of 2 really important things. Selling weapons to Ukraine, American-made weapons, is a nightmare for the Russian military. Ukraine's outmanned 10-1, but between their innovative technology and drones and the use of sophisticated American weapons, they have held their own and pushed back, and they're in the fight. It's a nightmare for the Russian military for the Ukrainians to have access to American weapons in perpetuity. By telling Europe, I will sell you the weapons, I will not give you the weapons, that changed the game. That's good for us because the money from Europe helps us rebuild our military industrial complex, and it shows the Russians that Ukraine is going to have American arms as far as the eye can see. When he put a 50% tariff on India, now why did he do that? The second largest purchaser of Russian oil and gas in the world is India. They buy oil in Russia below market, refine it in India, and sell it at a profit. The way you end this war, I think, is you deny Putin's customers the ability to buy cheap Russian oil without being tariffed. If China, India, and Brazil have to pick between the American economy and buying cheap Russian oil or gas, they're going to pick the American economy. 90% of the money coming in to fund the Putin war machine comes from oil and gas sales. My bill goes after his customers, and when President Trump used that concept against India, Putin shows up in Alaska.
Where's China in all of this? Because China is probably the biggest customer in terms of energy of Russia.
They're probably saying, oh, crap. Now, where is China in all this? China is the largest customer of Russia. They buy oil from Russia well below market, good for their economy. They help Russia in different ways. My belief is China is waiting and watching. Now, there's one thing you left out as to why the game has changed under Trump. When he obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, everybody said, oh, crap. President Trump went all in to help Israel destroy the nuclear infrastructure. He obliterated those 3 sites in the conversion facility. That got China's attention. That got Putin's attention. Here's what I think. If we don't end this war honorably and justly soon, that President Trump's going to take my bill. I've also have a bill about the 19,000 Ukrainian kids kidnapped and sent to Russia, making Russia a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law. China's worst nightmare is to do business with Russia if they have to face American tariffs. How does this war end? When she goes to Putin and says, I've helped you before, but I can't help you anymore because you're hurting my economy.
Let me ask you this, because I did have a couple of callers in the last half hour bring up this notion. They don't like the idea of rewarding the aggressor, in this case, Vladimir Putin, for his behavior, and meaning that he ends up coming out of this deal with more land. Now, we use the term land swaps, and we use the term security guarantees, including something similar to NATO's Article 5, which is countries will align with Ukraine and say, if you get attacked, we'll consider it an attack against us.
Right.
And a lot of people don't like the idea that Putin gets rewarded for that behavior. Your reaction to that?
Well, I understand exactly what you're saying. I'm sympathetic to you. And the world in which we live in is as follows. Russia has control of about 20% of Ukraine. I don't think Ukraine has the military ability to evict every Russian anytime soon. That means the war would go on and on and on. Now, how do you end conflicts? In the Cold War, well, after World War II, we divided up Europe. You had East Germany and West Germany. We never recognized East Germany as a separate, legitimate country, but we didn't attack either. So over time, East Germany and West Germany became one. So I'm realistic. We're going to have to recognize that there's Russian control of certain parts of Ukraine that are going to be in Russian hands to end this war. I don't want to give title to the land, but to end this war, I'm going to acknowledge that there's certain parts of Ukraine that Russia can control, but I'm not going to acknowledge as part of Russia. Just look at North Korea, South Korea. That's just the reality. But the most important thing President Trump can do for the world is make sure there's no third invasion. I think if we give security guarantees backing up Europe, let Europe be on the ground, we'll have their back, and we keep selling weapons to Ukraine, there will be no third invasion.
You advised President Trump to tell Putin if the war doesn't end justly, the U.S. will destroy Russia's economy. And this just breaking, like 9 minutes ago, the Russian foreign minister just outright rejected the idea that NATO forces could serve as peacekeepers in Ukraine, which was a provision sought by President Zelensky.
Yeah. Can you cuss on the radio?
Yeah. Well, depends what you're going to say. I mean, you can and you can. If it's that bad, I'll bleep it out. But don't worry, we're live.
How about?
I'm on a 7-second delay.
Okay, screw you. We're not going to let the Russians tell us what to do to protect Ukraine. They have no standing in my mind to have any idea about telling me or anybody else what they're going to do to prevent a third invasion. There will be NATO, European forces on the ground to prevent a third invasion. There will be guarantees where if they go into fight, we'll have their back. If they don't like that, keep fighting. And here's what I would say to President Trump. You have the moral high ground. You're the right guy at the right time. Start putting tariffs on China, starting tariffs on every country that does business with Russia, and you'll break them. Show the determination you've shown in the past. You will break them. They can't survive without oil and gas revenue. Make Russia a state sponsor of terrorism for kidnapping 19,000 Ukrainian kids and send them back to Russia. Go all in with destroying Russia's economy. Ukraine's outmanned, they're outgunned, but they're still in the fight. Russia is incredibly exposed. They have one source of revenue, oil and gas sales.
How long would this take to really impact the Russians?
Months, not years. It would impact China. It would impact India. It would impact Brazil. What would happen if all the major purchasers of Russian oil and gas all of a sudden said, I can't buy it anymore?
Well, especially now that he is opening up energy dominance in this country, we'll have the ability to fill that gap and fill that void and maybe even sell it at a discounted price and make it part of a larger trade deal with a lot of these countries.
Well, all those who are criticizing Trump about what he's doing and the way he's doing it.
Anyway, he's the only one that can pull this. I don't want to hear any more criticism from European leaders that have been impotent in dealing with Russia and, frankly, have helped fund his war machine by buying his energy.
Yeah. So let's look at it this way. If he had been a Democrat, he'd have 2 Nobel Peace Prizes. But now, one for the Abraham Accords, where you got 6 Arab nations to recognize Israel. He'd get a Nobel Peace Prize for Azerbaijan and Armenia have been at war for 30-something years. Rwanda, Congo, been a bloodbath. Remember Hotel Rwanda? I mean, he ended those things, and nobody gave him any credit for it. So he's going to end this war one way or the other. Russia is either going to accept an honorable, just outcome. We're not out to humiliate Russia. I'm not advocating for Ukraine to be in NATO. I'm not pushing for that. I'm not pushing for American troops on the ground. I'm pushing for a guarantee, a backstop guarantee to European forces. I'm trying to be practical here. There are going to be parts of Ukraine occupied by Russia until something changes down the road. I want to end the war. But here's what I would say. I would say that Europe needs to follow President Trump's lead. Why don't they put tariffs on Indian oil? Why don't they go after China? So I'm going to be hard on.
Well, up till now, they're the ones that have been buying the oil. So, I mean, getting lectured by them is a joke, and not one of them has the moral standing or the strength to successfully, pull this off and sit down with Putin and have Zelensky and all these European leaders 3 days later at the White House. None of them.
Right. So I've challenged European nations to put a 50% tariff on India, follow President Trump's lead. If the European economy and the American economy had a joint message to India, China, and Brazil, it definitely would work. But the EU trade deal was magnificent for us because you put your finger on it. Putin's nightmare has been Trump. Trump has given a pathway for American energy to go to Europe to replace Russian oil and gas. A $750 billion trade deal where Europe will buy American oil and gas, not Russian oil and gas. That's a tremendous blow. So we're set up now to crush the fossil fuel economy of Putin, have American alternatives to Russian oil and gas, and tell the customers that prop up this war machine in Russia, you're going to get hit. You're going to be denied access to the American economy without unless you pay major tariffs. I think it's the right.
Yeah, Senator, we're just out of time. I'm going to have to let you go. Senator Lindsey Graham.